My name is June Harper. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in a small brick house just outside Columbus, Ohio. I've been a widow for 16 years, but I've never really felt alone. Not with my garden out back my church circle on Tuesdays, and my grandchildren coming over every Saturday while their parents run errands or catch their breath. I bake every Friday night so the house smells like cinnamon rolls when the twins arrive. I clip coupons I don't need, and I still write grocery lists by hand even if I only need two things. My days have a rhythm. Not exciting, maybe, but it's a rhythm I can count on. I've always believed that a mother's job never really ends. It just softens into something quieter, like knowing when to bring soup or when to say nothing at all. I thought I was doing it right, showing up, staying helpful, not asking for much. But the other day, Claire looked at me from across the kitchen island and said something that landed heavier than I expected. Maybe you should stop coming by so much. That's what she said. Not with anger, just like it was a reasonable suggestion, like I was a recurring delivery that needed rescheduling. I smiled then. I remember that part clearly. I think I even nodded. I loaded the dishwasher the way she prefers, turned the mugs to face the same way, and asked if she still wanted me to pick the twins up from karate next week. She said they'd figure it out. I said, all right. On the drive home, I kept thinking about her tone. Not rude, not unkind, just firm, decided. And I couldn't help but wonder when my help became something they had to manage. When did I stop being the glue and start being the extra weight? I know they're busy. Matt's job is demanding Claire juggles 1,000 things and the kids are growing faster than I can keep up. But it used to feel like we were a team. I was part of the engine that kept their world running. Now I feel like a spare part, still functioning but quietly removed. I didn't say anything to anyone about it. I just pulled weeds a little longer that week, baked a little more than usual, stocked the fridge with the twins' favorite applesauce, even though they didn't come that Saturday. Maybe Claire forgot to mention it, or maybe she didn't. The truth is, I don't think they meant to hurt me. I think they just stopped noticing I was trying. I stayed out of the way. I adjusted. I thought I was helping. But maybe what they wanted was space, and maybe I've been filling it too long, too loudly without realizing it. Still, it stung. That one sentence carried more than she knew. It made me question all the little things I'd done and all the things I'd stopped doing. Maybe I should stop coming by so much. Maybe I should. Maybe that's what they were really saying. Or maybe that was just the first crack in something I didn't want to see breaking. Not yet. Matt was always my soft spot. Even as a boy, he had this quiet way of looking out for me after James passed. He was only 12, but he used to leave notes on the kitchen counter reminding me to eat or take a walk when I seemed low. We became a little team in those early years, him with his baseball glove and me in the stands cheering too loudly because I didn't want him to feel the space his father had left behind. When he met Claire in college, I was thrilled. She was smart, composed, thoughtful in a way that made me believe Matt had chosen well. I welcomed her with open arms, helped with the wedding, and offered my grandmother's china as a gift. In the beginning, it all felt seamless. Claire sent thank you cards for every small thing, and she even asked for my cobbler recipe once. That felt like an invitation, like I was being folded into their new beginning. But after the twins were born, something began to shift. Not all at once. More like a tide pulling back so slowly you don't realize you're no longer standing in water. Claire became more precise, more scheduled. Nap charts on the fridge, approved snacks in color-coded bins, rules for screen time, no juice, no sweets unless organic. I tried to keep up, but I felt like a guest in a house I helped build. I remember one afternoon when the twins were about 2. I had folded a load of laundry while Claire ran errands, the baby monitor tucked in my apron pocket. She came home, thanked me, then quietly refolded every single towel I'd just finished. Didn't say a word about it, just stood by the basket and began again, corner to corner, tighter folds stacked just so. I watched from the doorway, feeling like I'd done something wrong, without ever knowing what. At first, I chalked it up to new mother stress. Everything's overwhelming when you have toddlers. I gave her grace, told myself she didn't mean it as a correction. But it kept happening. Little things. She'd rearrange the snacks I brought, mention bedtime routines. In that way, that wasn't quite a criticism, just a reminder. Once she said maybe it's better if the twins don't have so much sugar right before nap. I had given them half a cookie, that's all. Just half. I tried adjusting. I asked before buying them clothes, even though I used to pick out their pajamas with such joy. I called ahead instead of dropping by, started texting instead of knocking. I scaled back my visits from twice a week to just Saturdays. Then only when asked. I thought maybe if I became smaller, quieter, more convenient, things would feel normal again. Matt didn't say much about any of it. He was always kind but distant in that way men can be when they're trying to keep peace. He'd hug me at the door, smile, ask about my garden, and then gently move the conversation back to schedules and updates. Claire handled most of the parenting talk. She made the rules, and Matt enforced them softly. There was this one moment I won't forget. I had brought over homemade muffins blueberry with a touch of lemon zest, the kind Matt used to love. Claire smiled when she saw them, but didn't unwrap the container. She said maybe next time I could ask first, because the twins were on a low sugar week. A low sugar week. I nodded, put them on the counter anyway, and later saw them untouched, still sealed in foil sitting beside a bowl of sliced cucumbers. It's not that I wanted praise. I didn't need them to gush over muffins or thank me for folding towels. I just wanted to feel like I was still part of their story. Like I still mattered in a way that wasn't conditional. But little by little, the rules multiplied, and I found myself second guessing every gesture. I kept thinking, when did I become a burden? Was it when the twins started school and they needed fewer hands? Or when Claire's parents retired and moved closer, making me one of several grandparent options? Maybe it was when I stopped being necessary and just became available. Always there, always reliable, until reliable turned into assumed and assumed turned into unwanted. Sometimes I'd sit in my car outside their house waiting to be let in. I never told them that. I just didn't want to seem too early or too eager or too much. I'd count the minutes, scroll through old photos on my phone, and rehearse what to say to make things easy, helpful, harmless. It's a strange thing watching your role in a family quietly shrink. There's no announcement, no turning point, just fewer calls, shorter visits, polite smiles, with no real invitation underneath. One day you wake up and realize you've been slowly edged out of the center and into the sidelines. And yet, I kept showing up. Because that's what mothers do. Even when we're not sure we're welcome, we keep showing up until the moment someone finally says it out loud. And when they do, it doesn't matter how gently they say it, the meaning lands just the same. It started with a casserole dish, a simple hand-painted ceramic that had belonged to my grandmother. I'd lent it to Claire for some dinner party with her coworkers, and I hadn't seen it since. I asked about it one afternoon casually while dropping off a bag of oranges the twins liked. She was typing on her laptop, barely looking up. I mentioned I needed it for a church potluck and thought maybe she could leave it on the porch. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, just kept typing. Then she looked up slowly, and there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite name. Not frustration, not annoyance, something colder. She said I was overstepping. That was the word she used. Not rude, not demanding, just overstepping. Like I had stepped over a boundary I didn't know existed. I stood there with my purse still on my shoulder, unsure what to say. I thought we were talking about a dish, but apparently we weren't. Claire set her laptop aside and began listing things. Moments, incidents, times when I had, in her words, undermined them as parents. She brought up the Christmas gift, the educational tablet I gave the twins, the same one they had already planned to give. I hadn't known, no one had told me. I thought I was being thoughtful. Then the snacks, the cookies, the pajamas I bought without checking sizes. She said I made things harder, not easier, that my presence came with strings even when I didn't mean it. I tried to speak. I wanted to explain. But Matt walked in from the garage just then, and when he heard the tone in Claire's voice, he asked what was going on. She told him. Not loudly, not dramatically, just point by point, like reading off a report. He didn't defend me. He didn't even hesitate. He folded his arms and nodded slightly, like all of this made sense to him. Like he had been carrying these same grievances too. That moment broke something in me. Not because they were angry, but because it was so calm, so practiced, as if they had rehearsed this, waited for the right time to unload everything I had done wrong. I looked at Matt, hoping for some flicker of the boy who used to bring me tea when I had a cold. The one who once whispered that he didn't want anyone else to pick him up from school but me. But he wasn't that boy anymore. He was a man standing beside his wife, and I was the problem they had quietly decided to solve. I nodded slowly, said I understood. I don't know if I really did. My hands were shaking slightly, so I slipped them into my coat pockets. The casserole dish was still missing, but I didn't care anymore. This wasn't about that. It was about every invisible line I had stepped over without knowing. Every correction Claire never voiced, every rolled eye behind a closed door, every conversation I wasn't part of. I walked to the door without being asked, said goodbye just once. Claire gave a short nod. Matt looked like he might say something, but he didn't. Outside, the air felt different. Heavier, maybe? Or maybe I was just carrying something I hadn't expected to pick up that day. The weight of no longer belonging. I drove home in silence, didn't turn on the radio, didn't cry, just kept seeing Matt's face. Calm, agreeing, choosing her not over me but away from me. That night I didn't eat dinner. Couldn't. Food tasted like nothing. I sat in my armchair and stared out the window, watching porch lights flicker on in neighboring homes. Inside those houses, people were laughing probably, eating, arguing, living. I just sat surrounded by framed memories that suddenly felt like relics, proof that once I had been part of something whole. I thought about calling Matt, thought about writing Claire a letter, but I didn't. I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a shift, and it had already happened. I don't remember turning the ignition. I don't remember pulling out of their driveway or passing the corner where the kids' school banner flaps in the wind. I only remember the silence. It wasn't just quiet in the car. It was inside me too, like someone had pressed a mute button and all the noise of being needed, being included, being wanted, had stopped without warning. I drove past the bakery where Matt used to beg for cinnamon twists on Saturdays, past the little park where we sat after his first dentist appointment when he cried in my lap and asked if I could come in next time and hold his hand. Those memories felt too warm for a day like this. Each red light was a pause I didn't want. Each green one felt too fast. The world moved around me like I didn't belong to it anymore. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow. When James died, Matt used to crawl into bed with me. He didn't say much. He'd just curl up his head on my arm and I'd listen to his breathing until morning. That rhythm saved me once. It reminded me that something I loved still needed me. Now I was driving home from a house I helped make from a family I helped raise, and no one had stopped me. No one had followed me out the door, not even a word of wait, or maybe, or come back tomorrow. I turned into my street slow and careful, though I knew every bump in that road. The maple tree in front of my house had started shedding crisp leaves scattered like warnings. My porch light was on. I had left it that way, a habit I never broke. I parked, sat with the engine off, and let the silence stretch. The house looked the same, the windows, the wreath on the door, the chair where the twins liked to bounce. But everything felt different now. Inside, the floor creaked the same way it always did. The grandfather clock chimed 6. I placed my purse down and stood there, not tired, not busy, just still, surrounded by rooms I once imagined would hold laughter forever. I climbed the stairs one at a time, not because I was old or sore, but because moving faster felt wrong. At the top, I paused by Matt's old bedroom. The door still had the faded sticker from when he was 10. MVP. He believed it then. So did I. I pushed the door open. The bed was made, the air faintly scented with lavender from the sachets I still changed out every few months. I had kept it ready for visits, for overnights, for hope. I sat on the edge of his bed just barely, like I was afraid the weight of me would undo something. My hands rested on my knees. The light outside faded. Still, I didn't turn on a lamp. I wasn't just grieving a moment. I was grieving the slow unraveling of a bond I thought was permanent. The kind that stretches but never snaps. But it had snapped quietly while I was still trying to make it hold. Downstairs, the fridge still held the twins' favorite yogurt. The pantry still had the crackers Claire approved. I had built my days around their routines. Now those routines didn't include me. I stood again, walked down, turned off the porch light. That felt harder than anything else. Because even when they didn't come, I always left it on. That night, I didn't cry. The tears were there, but they stayed where they were, caught somewhere between disbelief and ache. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling until morning. What do you do when the people you love don't need you anymore? You don't yell, you don't beg. You just learn to live in the quiet they leave behind. The morning light hit the kitchen counter just right, warm and gold stretching across the tile like it was trying to remind me of something I'd forgotten. I stood there, coffee in hand, and whispered the words before I even knew I'd thought them. I want to live before I die. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even loud. It felt like truth, clear and quiet, landing gently, but without room for argument. The house was still. The kind of stillness that doesn't comfort anymore. Just a silence that echoed what I already knew. This place had once been my center. Now it felt like a room I was no longer supposed to be in. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel rushed. It was more like coming up for air after holding my breath too long. Something had shifted in me, not all at once, but gradually. And now I could finally see it. I washed my mug, dried it with the same cloth I'd used 100 times, and set it down. The routine was still there, but the meaning had drained out of it. I didn't want to spend another season waiting by the phone hoping to be needed. So I called Frank. We hadn't spoken in years, but he still sent Christmas cards. He used to sit behind me in choir, always humming a little too loud. Now he sold homes and helped people plan what came next. He answered on the second ring. I said hi, told him who it was. He sounded surprised in a kind way. I asked if he had time to talk. About selling, about moving, about letting go. We met that Thursday. He wore the same brown loafers I remembered from church potlucks. His hair had gone mostly gray. He listened more than he talked, which I appreciated. I told him I wasn't sure what I wanted, only that I knew I couldn't stay. He looked around my living room like it was a museum. Photos on the walls, throw blankets folded neat, the vase with dried lavender on the mantel. He asked me how long I'd lived there. 52 years. I said it like a confession. Then he asked if I was sure. That part stung a little, but I smiled. I said I wasn't sure about anything except that I couldn't keep holding on to a life that had already moved on without me. He said he'd run the numbers, get some options, talk to a few buyers who wouldn't drag it out. He asked if I wanted to fix the place up first. I said no, let it be what it is. When he left, I sat on the couch and let my hands rest in my lap. I didn't feel brave, I didn't feel reckless, I felt ready, not to run, not to forget, just to live in some new way, on my own terms, at last. I started with the hallway closet. That felt safest. Scarves I hadn't worn in years, spare light bulbs, a few umbrellas with crooked spines. I made piles, keep, donate, discard. The process was quiet, almost soothing, like sorting through someone else's life until I picked up something that made me stop. James's sweater was still on the top shelf, folded neatly just the way I'd left it. He used to wear it on chilly Sunday mornings when we walked to church. I held it close to my chest, breathing in the scent that was no longer his but still felt like memory. I didn't cry. I folded it again slower this time and set it in the keep pile. In the kitchen, I found the wedding china, white with silver trim, delicate and slightly chipped from years of family dinners and clumsy hands. We never saved it for special occasions. Every Tuesday felt special enough when James was alive and Matt still lived at home. I wrapped each plate in newspaper, careful not to let the edges clink. Labeled the box family collection, even if I wasn't sure who counted as family anymore. The recipe notebook came next. Stains on the corners, pages stuck together with syrup and thyme. My mother's handwriting still on some of the older entries, then mine, then notes, scribbled in Matt's blocky letters from when he helped me bake cookies in 3rd grade. I traced a line where he had misspelled cinnamon, saved the page like it was something holy. Matt's childhood drawing was still taped inside the linen cabinet door, a stick figure version of us holding hands in front of a lopsided house. He had drawn our cat too, though it looked more like a dinosaur. I peeled it off gently, flattened it between 2 sheets of cardstock. Another thing to keep. By the second afternoon, I'd made it through the guest bedroom and the laundry room. I moved slower in the master bedroom. That space still echoed in my bones. The way James used to leave his shoes by the door, the sound of Matt's laughter when he jumped into bed after a thunderstorm. I opened the dresser and found a small box of keepsakes. Movie tickets from the first film James and I saw, a seashell Matt had brought back from a field trip labeled in faded marker, a lock of hair from the twins' first haircut. I sat on the edge of the bed and just held the box for a while. It felt like my whole life could fit in that small space. The photos were the hardest. Years of them tucked in albums framed on shelves, buried in drawers. I didn't want to throw them away, but I couldn't take them all. My new place would be smaller, quieter, more mine. I made 3 albums, one for Matt, one for the twins, one for me. It took me all day. I chose the moments that mattered. Their first day of school, my garden in full bloom, James in his old fishing hat, pretending he knew how to cast a line. I scanned the rest and saved them to a drive just in case anyone wanted them later. By the end of the week, most of the rooms were half empty. It made the house feel larger somehow, like it was breathing for the first time in years. The silence didn't hurt the way it used to. It just was. Every object I touched became a decision. Every drawer closed became a small act of letting go. I wasn't trying to forget. I was trying to make space. Not just in the rooms, but in myself. I boxed up the teacups, folded the last blanket, took one final walk through the house. I paused at the front door, hand on the knob, sunlight pooling on the floor where the twins once used to play. I didn't say goodbye out loud. I didn't need to. The house had heard enough from me over the years. What it gave back now was quiet permission. Time to go, time to begin again. The condo sat on the edge of a quiet stretch of beach in Maine. White walls met soft seafoam furniture, and the windows reached floor to ceiling. When I opened them, the ocean breeze came in like an old friend. The living room wasn't big, but it was just enough. A small round table near the kitchenette, two chairs on the balcony, and a sofa I picked out because it made me feel calm. Every piece in that space was something I chose. Not inherited, not gifted, not expected. There were no toys scattered across the floor, no folded notes on the fridge reminding me of school pickups. Just a pot of basil on the sill and the sound of waves in the background. I kept only what mattered: James's pocket watch, the chair my grandmother used to rock me in, the albums I had made with care, even my linens were new, crisp clean and blue like the sky on a clear day. Each morning I made tea and sat on the balcony with a blanket across my knees. I watched gulls skim across the water and the sun light up the horizon 1 inch at a time. The sea didn't ask me questions. It just breathed beside me. There were no babysitting schedules now, no surprise calls asking for help. I wasn't waiting for anyone to need me, and I didn't feel guilty about that. I walked the beach when I felt like it, ate late dinners without planning, talked to neighbors when I wanted company, and stayed in when I didn't. The pace was gentle and the quiet felt earned. Sometimes I still heard echoes of my old life, the sound of Matt's little feet on the stairs, the way Claire used to say my name when she was trying to stay polite. But those memories didn't pull me under anymore. They passed like waves, soft then gone. I wasn't just a mother here. I wasn't just a grandmother either. I was June, a woman with laugh lines and stories and soft gray hair that the wind no longer tangled against anyone's expectations. One morning I caught my reflection in the glass and didn't look away. I looked older, but I also looked alive. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to fit into someone else's life. I was living mine. The first call came mid-morning, just as I was watering the small basil plant on the balcony. My phone lit up with Matt's name then again, and then a short text that said only, "What have you done?" There was no hello. When he finally reached me by phone, his voice cracked with panic. He said the house was being torn down, construction crew, bulldozers. Mrs. McCarthy from next door had seen it and called him. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. He didn't ask why, he asked where. Where are you? Where are you living? And I told him simply, come see. He arrived that afternoon. He looked older than I remembered, tired like he hadn't slept. Claire stood beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. They looked like people who just lost something, and maybe they had. I opened the door before they knocked. The sea breeze caught the edge of the curtain. I stepped aside and let them in. Matt stood in the middle of the living room, eyes scanning the soft white walls, the pale green sofa, the photo album on the table. He didn't sit. He just stood there and asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell us?" I looked at him for a moment, then said, "You never asked?" He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. Claire looked out toward the ocean, her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Matt said they'd planned around the house, that it was supposed to be part of their future, that he thought I'd want them to have it. I nodded slowly, then asked, "Part of your financial planning?" He looked away, said that sounded terrible. I said, "How else should I put it?" They didn't respond, not right away. The silence filled the space between us, not sharp, not cold, just full. I walked over to the table and poured a second cup of tea, set it down, didn't push it toward him, just let it sit there. "You thought I would always be there," I said, "that the house would wait, that I would wait, but I already did that, for years." Claire's shoulders dropped. Matt rubbed the back of his neck the way he used to when he was 12 and caught in a lie. He whispered, "We didn't mean to forget you." And I said, "But you did." Not in anger, just truth. You saw what I gave, the babysitting, the dinners, the house, but you didn't see me, not really, not for a long time. They stayed a few more minutes. We didn't fight. We didn't argue. We just stood in the gentle weight of something we had all helped create and now had to carry together. As they left, Matt paused in the doorway. He looked out at the waves, then back at me. I don't know what I expected him to say, but he only nodded, quiet and unsure. I nodded too. When the door closed behind them, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel sad. I felt still, like something had landed where it was meant to be. Claire spoke first. Her voice was calm but tight, like something pulled too long. She said I blindsided them. I didn't flinch, just held her gaze and said no. You just weren't paying attention. She looked down then at the floor at the coffee table, anywhere but at me. The room fell into a quiet that felt heavier than words. I let it hang there. Matt shifted his weight and finally spoke. He said they'd been counting on the house, that it was part of their financial planning, their future, like he was explaining a spreadsheet. I didn't raise my voice, just asked one question. Your planning included my death? He blinked. Claire looked at him, then at me, and said nothing. The air in the room felt still and cold. I didn't ask to be taken care of. I didn't ask for anyone to rearrange their life around me, but somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing me as a person. I became a placeholder, a line on a plan they didn't think I'd ever read. Matt looked like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. His mouth opened then closed again. The silence between us wasn't angry, it was a mirror. I let it stay quiet, not out of cruelty, just because sometimes silence does the work that words can't. Claire finally sat down. She didn't cross her arms, didn't offer excuses. She just sat there like someone who had suddenly realized how much they'd missed. They hadn't asked what I wanted. Not once. Not when I gave up weekends. Not when I cleared holidays to match their schedules. Not even when I stopped calling. I wasn't punishing them. I was freeing myself. Matt looked around the condo again, his voice softer now. He asked if I was happy here. I nodded. I am. He swallowed hard, then nodded too. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but something in that quiet cracked open. A beginning. Not of what we were, but maybe of what we still could be. The first Sunday dinner felt strange at first. Not because of the food or the space, but because we were all a little unsure of how to start over. I had set the table for 5-8. There were no place cards or matching napkins this time. Just a roast chicken, some mashed potatoes, and the store-bought pie Claire picked up on the way. The twins sat by the balcony door watching the waves like they'd never seen the ocean before. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't talk about what happened. But we didn't pretend either. I told them I'd babysit on Wednesdays, from 2 to 6. That's what I could give, and that was enough. Claire nodded, and I saw something softer in her face. She mentioned she had started painting again, just little watercolor landscapes. She said it helped her feel like herself again. I told her I was glad, then offered more tea. Matt helped clear the dishes. He didn't talk much, but he stayed longer than I expected. He asked if I needed anything fixed around the condo. I told him not today, maybe next time. The twins brought me drawings they had made. One was a beach, the other a stick figure woman in a chair with wild gray hair. I laughed and taped them to the fridge. There were still small moments, a glance that lingered too long, a pause before someone spoke, but the space between us felt less sharp, less careful. We weren't trying to return to what we had. We were building something new, slower, simpler, real. That night after they left, I stood by the balcony and watched the stars rise over the water. The wind was cool, the tide steady. I wasn't alone. I wasn't forgotten. We hadn't said we forgave each other, but sometimes forgiveness isn't in words, it's in coming back. It's in trying again. I turned 73 on a plane to Lisbon. It was my first time leaving the country since Matt was in high school. The flight was long, the air dry, and my legs ached more than I expected, but I didn't mind. There was something about sitting alone in that little seat wrapped in a blanket, knowing I had no one to report to. No plans to fit around anyone else's needs. I watched the sun rise over the clouds and felt like I was becoming someone I hadn't met yet. Lisbon was warm and bright. The sidewalks were made of tiny stones that clicked under my shoes. I stayed in a modest hotel near the river with a balcony just big enough for one chair and a small pot of yellow daisies. Every morning I walked. No map, no timeline, just wandered and let the streets lead me. I bought fresh bread from a woman who didn't speak English, but smiled like she understood me anyway. One afternoon, I found myself in a quiet square where a street artist sat sketching tourists. I watched him for a while. He motioned me over and asked if I wanted to be drawn. I sat down on the little stool, unsure of what I expected. He studied me for a few minutes before he said softly, "You look like someone who let go of the wrong things." I didn't respond. I just smiled and something in my chest loosened. When he finished the sketch, I held the portrait in my lap. It didn't look younger. It didn't look softer, but it looked like me. Someone who had lived, someone who had stopped waiting. That night back in my hotel room, my phone buzzed with a message from Matt. The twins want to know when grandma's coming back. I looked out at the city lights, then typed my reply. Sunday, I've got surprises too. I didn't say what they were. I didn't need to. Maybe I'd bring them little painted tiles from a shop near the cathedral, or stories about a tram ride that got stuck on a hill, or maybe just the version of me they'd never met before, the one who finally remembered how to belong to herself.